Hey everyone, I'm Sabe42. Welcome to my career mode science tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to concentrate on one thing: get science fast. So in order to do that, we're going to need to get away from Kerbal and land on the moon as quickly as possible. We'll need a big rocket, lots of fuel and engines, and we'll have to get by with just the first few technologies. So that means no stability enhancers. We'll need to have a sturdy base for our rocket to stand on. We won't have struts either, so we need to be careful where we place our attachment points. And we're not even going to have fuel lines, which means no fancy staging. Is this even possible? Heck yeah! The only mod I'm using in this game is the Kerbal Engineer. This gives me a few extra parts and only helps with delta V calculations. I won't be using these during flights though, so for all intents and purposes, everything here is going to be stock. Alright, so our first rocket design isn't really a rocket at all. This is going to be the pre-flight checkout. So Jebediah is just going to get out, he's going to look around and kind of analyze his surroundings. And there's a couple of experiments we can do just from the launch pad without going anywhere. So that's what we're going to do first. So the first one we're going to do is an EVA report and a crew report and collect surface samples. So the crew reports and the EVA reports, you get all the science from just a single experiment. And there's a little quirk in the game. If you're on the ladder when you do an EVA report, even though you're on the ground, it says that you are flying. So you can actually get two EVA reports here. One is if you're flying, and the other you drop down and then do an EVA report from the ground. So you can get one from the ground and flying. And so here's a surface sample, and here is our EVA report. We're going to store those, and we're going to get back on the ladder and go into we're going to board. So we'll store those in the capsule. But the capsule can only hold one soil sample at a time. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to take another soil sample, or surface sample, from Jebediah is going to hold on to it, and then we'll recover him so that we'll get the science there, but the capsule is still on the launch pad. So we'll go into the tracking station and select the pre-flight checkout mission and recover, and we'll get whatever's in the capsule. And so this is going to give us a total of 20 science points for both of those little missions. And that will allow us to get 2 technologies in the technology tree. So usually, in all of my other times, we've only been able to get 1, but this time that will give us just enough to get that bottom one. So we'll be able to get the LV909 engines, as well as the landing gear and better parachutes. Okay, so for this next flight, we're actually going to lift off the launch pad, and we've got goo experiments now, so we're going to do a bunch of those. And we're going to be transmitting our crew report, since we can only hold one of those in the capsule. So for the antenna, I'm going to need 2 symmetry. And we're going to need a way to get electricity. So for that, we're going to use the LV-T30 engine. And then this stage that I'm building right now, we're going to put 4 symmetry on that. And we're going to use the modular girder segments. This is going to give us a place to attach goo containers to, as well as give us a wide base in case we land on a slope. And then putting 1 parachute on each of them. This should slow us down enough so that if we land in the water, we're not going to fall apart. So, okay, the goo containers, this one attached to the side, we have to make sure that it's above the bottom so that our decoupler will be able to go on there. And then we're going to put 3 of these here, which is going to give us a total of 12 experiments. We're going to do experiments in pairs so that we can maximize the science we get from these. Alright, so for the next stage, I would normally want to use the LV909 engines for the whole thing. But since we need to recharge our batteries, we need an engine with an alternator, which means we need to use the LV-T30 engine. And that engine has approximately 4 times the fuel consumption of the 909 engine. So we need about 1/4 of the fuel tanks. So for this, you can see I'm trying to place it and the other ones are red, but just flicking the WS keys can make them green. So the 200 fuel tanks have about half of the 400 fuel tanks, and since we're using two 400s, this arrangement should give us 1/4 of the fuel in the 909 engines. I would like all the engines on each stage to burn out completely before we separate the stages. So now we're going to build the stage that's going to actually get us off the launch pad. And here I'm using the Alt key to copy when I click on things instead of having to pull them off from the toolbar. And we're going to do 3 symmetry for these. We're going to stick them on the bottom since that's the strongest point, the point of attachment. And that's where the engines are going to go. Also notice that I've placed the outer fuel tank slightly lower than the middle one. This will put the weight of the spacecraft on the outer engines. The LVT-30 engines are great because they're so powerful, but they have the drawback that they don't have any gimbaling. So you can't really control the rocket when it's going up. So we're going to put 3 symmetry of the LV-909 engines, and we're going to do the same trick with adding 1/4 of the fuel that the LVT-30 has. So the 909 engines will provide the control on our ascent, and the LVT-30 engines will provide the power. Now normally a design like this wouldn't be stable without using struts, and it would shake itself apart on the ascent. But because we attach the outer fuel tanks at the bottom, this will prevent it from shaking. So now we're going to adjust our staging so that stage 3 and stage 2 are combined into one. So we hit the spacebar once, and the stage will separate, and the next one will fire at the same time. So now let's change our name to the Big Science Rocket, and let's get ready to roll. So during our first flight, we're going to do 3 types of experiments. We're going to get the GOOS, the crew reports, and the EVA reports. So we've already got the EVA report and the crew report. So now we will get the GOOS from the launch pad, and we'll keep them. We're only going to transmit the crew reports because we can only hold one of them. So here we go. So now we'll hit the Shift key, throttle up, and then press the T key to engage SAS, and spacebar to launch. So let's monitor our resources, and we'll transmit a crew report. Now these take about 30 electricity to transmit using this antenna. We've got 50, but the charge will restore very quickly because we're firing our engines. So now we're going to get 2 GOOS while flying. We've already got the EVA report and the crew report, but during the atmosphere, as we're going through the atmosphere, we are going to hold off on any EVA reports because sometimes, it seems to happen more often than not, the Kerbal will let go as he comes off, and then if they're in the atmosphere, they will go flying away. So you could be daring and do it right before, like in the upper atmosphere, right before orbit to get an upper atmosphere EVA, but I'm not going to chance it in this one. And actually, I'm not even going to be going into orbit on this flight. I'm just going to be going straight up and straight back down, and we'll do the experiments as we get to the different altitudes. So if you notice, I have just hit the period key to increase the time warp. Now, I don't recommend this, especially on ascent, because it kind of accelerates the physics, but in terms of saving time, I just wanted to get up to 20,000 feet more quickly. So now we'll go back to time warp 1, and 20,000 feet is just the start of the upper atmosphere. So we will do a crew report here. There we go, upper atmosphere. We'll transmit this, and then we'll do our GOOS observations. Now notice the LVT-30 engines just ran out, but the 909s are still going just a little bit longer, so they're not exactly 4 times as much fuel consumption, but pretty close. So we're at 64,000. We need to get up to 70,000 for the next experiment. So here we go. We'll hit the spacebar again, and we'll continue to go beyond 70. So 20,000 was upper atmosphere. When you cross 70,000, that is the start of near space, near Kerbal, or in space near Kerbal. So we will continue to fire engines and until about 150. That'll give us some coasting time, so we can take our time with these experiments. So 150, I'm going to press the X key, kill the engines, and then the M for the map will get us back. And now we are in space near Kerbin. So now we'll do another goo observation. And we'll keep these. Try to find 2 more that haven't been used yet. And now we'll do another crew report, transmit that. And now let's get our Kerbal Jebediah out on an EVA. So here we go. EVA report and keep. And then we press F to board. It will get stored in the capsule. So notice our electric charge is somewhat low still. We don't have enough to do another crew report. But when we fire our engines, notice it will recharge because we have that LVT-30 going. It's going to recharge our batteries. So then we get to the next point, which is going to be in space high above Kerbin. We'll be able to do another crew report. So I believe this one starts at around 250,000 meters, but we'll bring it out to around 300,000 so we got some coasting room. And then with the period key, we'll accelerate time a little bit to get above 250. And let's get our crew report. Transmit. And then let's find some goos that haven't been used yet. There should be 4 left. So we still have one more spot to do experiments after this, and that's going to be wherever we happen to land. There's a lot of different biomes on Kerbin that you can land at. So as long as you don't land directly on the the launch pad. Look, there he goes. He let go when he came out. So if we were in the atmosphere, he would have gone flying away. So let's grab and board again. And now let's get ready to go back down and go back in the atmosphere again. So we still have a little ways to go before we start falling. It kind of looks like we're going to fall in the water, but Kerbin is going to be rotating as well, so we might miss it and fall on land. What we don't want to do is we don't want to fall on a mountain. Anywhere but a mountain will be fine. So we're going to tip ourselves sideways, and this would be a great place to save the game. So if you press F5 here, you'll save the game, and then you can hold F9 later in case if you land on a mountain. You can go back and thrust a little bit, and hopefully you'll land in a different spot. So one of the reasons for going sideways is when I hit the space bar to decouple this stage, it's going to be thrown away from me, because it has a tendency to, like, the lander will fall quicker because I guess it's more dense. And if I were to eject it or I'm in the same path, when I open the parachutes, it's going to hit me. We don't want that to happen. So here we go. We're entering the atmosphere, getting fiery. And look at that. I thought I was going to come down in the water, but look, we almost hit the mountains. Oh, shock waves. So slowing down. It doesn't really matter when you hit your parachutes, but spacebar again, we'll toggle the parachutes. And now we're slowing down. And they'll open when we get 500. Whoa, look at that. 500 meters above the ground, and that other stage almost hit us. So even though I ejected it sideways, it still almost came down to get me. So now we will toggle our landing gear with the G key and accelerate time again until we get close to the ground. Here we go. Now we'll go back to time warp 1. Oh, by the way, that is the comma key. So we got period to accelerate, comma to decelerate. There we go, touchdown. And it looks like we could have landed on quite a bit more slope without having to worry about it, thanks to our wide stance. So we'll do our last 2 goo observations, and then we'll do the crew report, and we'll save this because we don't have enough to transmit enough electricity. And there we go, the result of our mission. This should give us enough science points to get the next 3 technologies. All these technologies are going to be important in our moon mission. So we're going to get the LVT-45 engine, which is similar to the LVT-30, but it has gimbaling, so we're not going to need to pair 2 different types of rocket engines together. We can have one engine that's going to get us into orbit, and then we'll have the radial decoupler and also the material science bay, so we can combine that with the goo canisters and then do experiments over there and bring them back to Kerbin for mega science. Well, that concludes part 1 of my tutorial series. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for part 2, where we're going to go directly to the moon with the science that we've gathered. Take care.